If you were to make up a title for this discussion, this little debate, what would you say it's about? Is it about positive? Does positive thinking work, or would you think of another title?
No, I would call it the positive thinking scam.
That's a good title. So let's start with that. The positive thinking scam. I'll let you start off with, and I'm going to try and maybe rebuff some of the things you're saying.
Sure. So I think we need to distinguish between three kind of related but distinct things. Yeah, there's just a character trait of being optimistic. Yeah. Then there's times when people say things like think positively. Yeah. Suggesting that you should be more optimistic in a particular situation. Yeah. And then there's another thing, which is the positive thinking movement. And now this is an ideology. It's not about character traits. It's an ideology which suggests that the world is shaped by our wants and desires and thoughts, so that by focusing on the good things, the bad things just cease to exist, or at least they leave you alone and go elsewhere, as if you've created a kind of immunity for yourself. So in this ideology, thinking about good things leads to success and happiness, and failing to think about good things leads to failure and unhappiness, which is your fault because you've failed to change your thought patterns.
Okay. Can I just say a little bit here?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone does have their own idea of what positive thinking is. I mean, I've heard of this movement as well. I think you've got the books like The Biggest Secret, I think, which is sort of going down that idea of you create the world around you and you should think positive. But one thing I haven't heard is people saying it's your fault. That in some ways that sounds like something quite negative to me. Like I haven't heard many people saying if you're not successful, it's your fault, because that would be, to me, that would go against. If someone did have a positive thinking movement, then actually point at someone and say it's your fault that you haven't become successful. There can't be that many people who actually do that in the positive thinking movement.
Well, let's put it this way. We can think of. I think everybody can think of times in their life where they feel depressed or they're sad about something, and another person tells them to think positive, and it isn't all that bad. Yeah. Either that's because you're just sad about something, and the other is that you're clinically depressed. Yeah. They're very different, of course. So let's talk about depression first. Okay. So a lot of people come to this positive thinking movement because they just want to fulfill more goals in their life or something like this. Yeah. But some people try it as a way of dealing with depression, and I would say that if you're depressed, positive thinking is not the place to go, because the advice you get is really inadequate and potentially damaging, I would say. So, for example, medical research has shown, I think beyond any doubt, that depression is a legitimate medical problem. Yeah. Various kinds of depression have been defined, and there's one, manic depression, which goes in cycles. So you have short periods of being intensely depressed and short periods of being intensely positive and ambitious. When you start all kinds of projects and then you get depressed and you can't finish any of them, you look around you at the the mess in your garage or whatever, and you think, oh my God, I'm a total fucking failure.
Isn't being bipolar linked to that as well?
It is, yeah. There's definite kind of crossover in those conditions. But look, one of the characteristics of depression is that people lose their usual ability to see their difficulties in perspective. Yeah. So whatever problems you have, they begin to seem, insurmountable. You can, of course, say that most people's problems do pale in comparison to losing your leg or I don't know, Russian insurgents invading your town or finding out you've got terminal cancer. Most people's problems are a lot smaller than that. So you can legitimately say to these people, look, it's not that bad and everything will work out and so on, and probably there's a good chance you're right. Yeah. But that's part of the disease of depression, that you can no longer do that. So so when these people come to the positive thinking movement, and they're all about thinking positive thoughts and changing your thought patterns and so on. Basically, what the positive thinking people are saying to the depressed people is, you know that disease you've got? Try not to have it. You know?
Yeah, no, I can totally understand that. I think someone with medical depression, it's gonna. I still think that thinking positively is not gonna, or going down a route of starting to change their mentality. Is a good route to go down to start think positive, but no, I don't think anyone. Well, I don't think it'd be wise for anyone to say, yeah, you just need to do this. It's that simple. It's not going to be that simple for someone with depression. That's going to it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot more time. But I still think changing the mindset of that person is a route to go down for sure.
But I mean, unfortunately, these positive thinking people just have no understanding of that, and also they're in it for the money. So they're going to accept. They're not going to make that we could call it, I suppose, an ethical distinction. They're not going to make that distinction. And another problem there is that if you're feeling depressed, which usually involves feelings of inadequacy and failure and so on, then you surround yourself with people telling you how they've changed their lives by thinking positively, and it doesn't work for you, then you've just got one more reason to see yourself as a failure. And in fact, the mind of a depressed person is in some ways on a mission to destroy that person's self-worth. This disease, when you're in the grip of it, I suppose you could say, one thing that happens is you take whatever input is around you in the environment and you try to interpret that in a way that tells you that you're crap. Yeah, so the worst thing to do is to surround yourself with people who are telling you how successful and happy.
I think I would agree with you that someone with long-lasting clinical depression, positive thinking alone is not going to be the only answer. I think there's going to be lots of other issues that their doctor will talk to them about. But yeah, for sure it's not. But I would say that the positive thinking movement. And I'm just using that label to encompass everything to do with positive thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that it's not particularly aimed at manic depressives. It's aimed at everybody.
Okay, so let's talk about people who just feel a bit sad. Perhaps they're just down about things generally, or something specific has happened in their life. They're grieving, or
maybe they feel a bit unfulfilled with their lives.
Yeah. That's a perfectly normal part of life, and in fact I would argue that it's necessary to our overall well-being, that when bad shit happens we allow ourselves to react emotionally in inappropriate ways, and if we don't, I would think it tends to make us quite fucked up and tends to make us a bit robotic. But the positive thinking movement completely disagrees with this. It's always offering reasons why you shouldn't feel sad regardless. There's this everything happens for a reason line, for example, which it isn't specific to the positive thinking movement, but they use it a lot, and it's absolutely awful. I mean, it's awful in a number of ways, but in terms of a response to seeing a sad person, if you say, look, don't worry, everything happens for a reason, what you're actually saying to them is one of two things. First, this sadness of yours, it's not legitimate, it's not justified, because there's a reason, you just are too stupid to get it. Or two, you're actually saying there's a reason why you're sad, which almost sounds like you deserve to be sad. And I think both of these are quite cruel and horrible messages.
But I would say that everything happens for a reason isn't any mantra of a positive thinking movement. I would say that's an age-old phrase, and that you can link things to that. But I would say it might be better to say that you can learn from even negative situations.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, let's face it, most of the negative situations in our life, or most of the mistakes we made, are the biggest learning experiences. That's where we do learn the most from. So it's a very positive way of thinking about a negative situation, but it is actually true. You make a mistake, and you'll learn something from it.
Yeah, I agree. But I think part of the learning is to go down through that trough of whoops, I fucked up, and really feel that. That's the impetus for you to avoid the same mistake next time. But look, PT, positive thinking believers, say this kind of stuff to themselves all the time. Think positive thoughts, and I think they're cutting themselves off from something that's necessary to our mental health. And look, in psychological terms, if you're cutting negative, unhappy thoughts out of your psyche, what you're doing is cultivating a state of denial in your mind. Now, this denial thing, it's something which psychologists have studied a lot, because they've found that when people confront really unpleasant events in their lives, say a loved one dies, or you go through a divorce, or the end of an important relationship, when these things happen, there's a denial stage that a lot of people go through, and as a temporary thing, it has a real concrete purpose. It's part of the recovery. Things that we need to recover from, certain things that stop us from functioning and participating normally in our lives, and denial is something that can serve us in these situations. But the thing is, it's meant to be temporary. People who get stuck in denial, who are denying their problems, saying everything's working, I'm going to be successful, la 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 la, and don't move past that, usually end up, I would say, being very neurotic and unhappy. And these people, in turn, usually have a poisonous influence on the others around them, because they can never accept what's really going on, or evaluate things honestly. So it's impossible to address any kind of problem with someone who's permanently in denial. They just ignore it, or they blame everyone else. They're difficult people to deal with.
See, yeah, I've never thought of positive thinking in that kind of way, that it is denial. If something bad happens, I've never thought that it should be whitewashed as though something bad isn't happening. I think the acknowledgement, and I think there's a lot of people in a positive thinking movement who would acknowledge that, who wouldn't say you deny something bad has happened. You accept something's bad's happened, but then you think, what is the best way out of this situation, and you start thinking positively as soon as you can. You can dwell, wallow in misery for a while. It's almost like grieving in a way. You can do that for a while, but really, you should, as soon as you can, you should start thinking about what's the best way out of this situation.
Yeah, I agree. But I want to give you an example. So there's an author, Barbara Ehrenreich. She has written a book about positive thinking, and not a congratulatory book. She's very critical of the positive thinking movement, and she came to this. She was already a published author, but she came to the conclusion that she wanted to write this book after being diagnosed with breast cancer. Now, this is a classic story that you hear. The person had incurable cancer. The positive thinking movement loves this story. The person had incurable cancer. The doctors had tried everything, no results. The tumor was inoperable, la 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 la. But these people just refused to let the disease get them down. They stayed positive. They stayed cheerful and said, "I'm not going to die. I've got so much to live for." And then they just mysteriously got better. And somewhere in the story, the word miracle usually turns up, which I really think is always a sign that there's a lot of lazy thinking going on, or that someone's trying to scam you. So positive.
Now I have to interrupt slightly there. I mean, there are scam artists around, but there are cases of miracles around the world, and having faith in something good to happen there has been proven cases where that has worked. Now, I don't necessarily think that someone should apply that to every situation, but I think you could find cases for sure where it has worked, and positive thinking in medical conditions, I think, has been scientifically proven to actually have actually made some people better in some situations. That's
it. Yeah, but that's exactly the point. I read a quote earlier online. I just came across it coincidentally by one of the early psychoanalysts. I can't remember, Jung or Adler or someone like that. And the quote was let your positivity, or let your optimism be a character trait. Don't let it become an ideology. Because I agree. I mean, if something as catastrophic as that happens to you, you can spend the last months of your life being horribly depressed, or you can, enjoy and savor the time you have left, and so on and so on. And of course, that's the better way to go about it, But this author, Ehrenreich, she had treatment for breast cancer, but during the treatment, doctors kept saying to her that the key was to think positively. And when you're fighting something as serious and scary as breast cancer, and you're with doctors in white coats with machines next to them, that's not what you want to hear, and it's not always going to be possible to think positive thoughts when something so traumatic is happening to you. So at various times, Ehrenreich expressed her fear and her anger, this thing that people naturally go through when they're hit with a terminal illness. Why me? What did I do to deserve this, and so on. And these medical professionals lectured her for being so negative. Stay positive, everything will be okay. So she went onto the internet, and she joined lots of forums started by breast cancer sufferers, and she found that there was a legion of breast cancer sufferers out there who had slipped into this delusion that the medical treatment was neither here nor there, that the only way to beat cancer was to stay upbeat. And these women, there were women writing books with names like The Gift of Cancer,
That's pretty sick.
It is. She found like everybody who posted on forums to breast cancer was going on about this positive thinking stuff, and no dissent was allowed. So she, of course, tried to introduce a different point of view onto some of these forums, and she was basically told to get lost, go away, you need psychological therapy. So now, to me, that's just grotesque,
It is, but I would say that's I guess some of the doctors involved in this situation would have probably read studies of people thinking positively, and they have, and it had an effect on some illnesses, and they had no other options because there's no cure for cancer. So it's the only thing they could offer her, because what else are they going to offer her? There is no cure for cancer, and that's another subject we can discuss at a later date, because I believe that basically there could have been a cure for cancer by now. It's basically there's too much money in it. Basically, nobody's properly researching the causes and solutions of cancer, because nobody wants there to be a cure for cancer. In fact, I think there are people that have claimed they have found the cure for cancer, but they're being shunned by the medical profession. So it is another subject, but these doctors had nothing to offer, so the only thing they can offer is positive thinking.
Yeah.
I think things like, the book title you mentioned, The Gift of Cancer, that's ridiculous.
It starts to get, it's like I said at the start, it's on a spectrum, and I think for a lot of the spectrum, what you're saying is perfectly true. But there's a kind of one end of the spectrum where, as I said, it becomes an ideology, and then it starts to get creepy.
It does, yeah. But at the same time, if someone did have cancer, like you said yourself, the positive thing, it's not such bad advice, because if that person is going to die a year from now, like you said, what can you do? Are you going to spend that year thinking negatively, or do you want to spend it doing everything you ever wanted to do and thinking as positively as possible? Because you're going to have the most positive year thinking that way, the more positive year than you are if you think negatively. So there's quite a big element of truth in it.
Okay. Yep. Let's talk about some case studies which involve visualizations. Because positive thinking, it's all about goals. It's one of these systems that claims it can help you achieve your dreams, and I think instinctively when someone says thinking positively will let you achieve your dreams, a lot of people would just instinctively say, well, yeah, maybe to an extent, but the most important thing is to think realistically. So be prepared for success and be prepared for difficulties. And when you're embarking on something new in life, you really need to do this, because if you don't, then you're going to invest a lot of emotion or a lot of money or whatever into something that may not work. So it turns out that the research that's been done on this supports the idea, which I think our instinct probably tells us is true. Like a lot of research, it kind of tells us what we know. But there have been a lot of studies on things like visualizing your future success and things like this. So the first one, University of California, researchers took 2 groups of students, and they asked one group to spend a little time each day visualizing getting a high grade in their upcoming exams. They were asked to create an image in their mind's eye. So imagine themselves doing well, see yourself in the exam, you understand all the questions, you do a great job. Then visualize what happens when you get your results, the big party, your parents being proud of you, blah, blah, blah. So they were told to do that every day. And then there was a control group who weren't given any visualizations. Yeah, but they were just told, do whatever you normally do to prepare for an exam. But the researchers asked both groups to keep a journal where they noted down how many hours of study they did. And this is the interesting bit. The visualizations only lasted a few minutes, but the students who did them spent hours less studying, and they ended up with lower grades. Second study, University of Pennsylvania, the researchers talked to females who were dieting, and they asked these women to rehearse scenarios in their heads about food-related situations. So for example, going to a friend's house for dinner and there's lots of food there that you shouldn't eat while you're on this diet, or going to a party, whatever. So they took any answers, but then they categorized them as positive or negative. So if a woman said, yeah, sure, I could be at a party, I'd stick to my diet, I'd resist every temptation, that was categorized as extremely positive. Whereas if she said, I would totally lose the plot, like after one drink I'd just eat everything I could see, that was classified as a negative answer. Again, these researchers found that the women with the positive thoughts lost less weight than the ones with the more pessimistic thoughts. So that the women who essentially said, no, I'm strong, I'll never be tempted, actually were, more so than the ones who perhaps had a lower opinion of their ability to stick to the diet.
Yeah, I would say about these tests, there's so many tests though, isn't there? I think a lot of these people do tests which they already sort of know the outcome, so that they can prove a theory that they already exists, or an idea they already have. Because I can tell you another another trial that was done at the University of South Carolina, by Barbara Fredrickson.
Excellent. Research fight.
Barbara Fredrickson tested the impact of positive emotions on the brain by setting up an experiment. She divided her research subjects into 5 groups and showed them different film clips. The first 2 groups were shown film clips that created positive emotions. Group 1, for example, saw images that created feelings of joy. Group 2 saw images created feelings of contentment. Group 3 was a control group. They saw images that were neutral and didn't produce any specific emotion. And the last 2 groups were shown clips that created negative emotions, creating images of that created feelings of fear and feelings of anger. Afterwards, each participant was asked to imagine themselves in a situation where similar feelings would arise and write down what they would do. Now, they were given pieces of paper to write down what they would do. Sort of starting off, for example, I would like to. Participants who saw images of fear and anger wrote down the fewest responses, while the participants who had seen the images of joy and contentment wrote down a significantly higher number of things that they would do. And so basically, in other words, when you're experiencing positive emotions of joy, contentment, love, you're going to see more possibilities. That's what the outcome of this. So basically, I was just I only said that just to show you that anyone can make a trial and come up with an outcome, because that's what these scientists do, don't they?
Yeah, no, it makes sense in a way. If you're in a positive frame of mind, then you're more geared to coming up with strategies.
Absolutely, and I think that is the strength of positive thinking. That when you start thinking positively, you do start to have more ideas about how to get yourself out of a negative situation. But I don't think you should. You mentioned about visualization.
Yeah.
I think the problem with your example about the passing the exams, I don't think the visualization is particularly successful when you set a deadline. when you say this has got to happen on this particular date. What it's got to be is something like your second example, where someone was trying to lose weight. Is not to say I'm going to lose weight by this day and visualize it, and basically just visualize what's going to happen, the outcome, but don't set a deadline, because you may not do it in 3 weeks, you may not do it in 4, but if you have visualized how you're going to look at a certain point, then you can eventually achieve it. It's like you've been in the boxing ring, you're going to get knocked down, there's going to be setbacks, but you can still achieve that visualization of you in a slim state.
I think that the danger is, I don't disagree with you, but I think the danger is that if you put too much emphasis on this, you can get lost in your visualization.